Welcome back to HFO Multifamily Market Watch, your trusted source for information for apartment owners and investors. Multifamily Market Watch is presented by Pacific Exteriors Northwest, a contractor specializing in siding and exterior envelopes and delivering exceptional quality and service for over 30 years. And by Gantry Incorporated, the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm.
Welcome back to Multifamily Market Watch. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. And today we have with us Ezra Hammer. He's with Jordan Ramis, attorney here in town and specializes in kind of land use and real estate. Thank you for taking the time to come speak with us.
My pleasure.
Maybe you could give a little background on, kind of your area of expertise, and we'll kind of get into some of the land use. And maybe, we talked about specifically maybe the conversion of apartment or office buildings to housing, but maybe shine the light for people that don't know you, kind of where your expertise is in this field.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I'm such an admirer of what you guys are doing. I think it's hugely important. The types of stuff we work on is dry and boring, but it has real impacts for what it means to be here as a Portlander and an Oregonian. A little bit about me, like so many other folks, I'm a Californian by birth, but somebody who escaped and came up here because of the incredible things that the Pacific Northwest has to offer. I have about a decade of experience in the kind of multifamily world, both as an attorney in California here, and I do work in Washington as well, also with a development company, and as a regulator. So I worked for the city of Los Angeles in the role of a senior planner tasked with doing things like negotiating development agreements and helping shepherd projects through the discretionary process.
So you've been on both sides of the desk then, of the development side, the legal side, then also from the public side, looking at, hearing those arguments, what changes have to get made.
Yeah, and I like to think that it provides me with a little bit of perspective because, as developers they want to run quick. They want to move fast, and I've seen the other side of things where there's pressure to go the other way, and I think that helps me modulate expectations in a way that's helpful.
And are you seeing? Comparing kind of California and the ease of development, is it perceptually easier here? What is your kind of take on that, just being that you've had experience in other markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think kind of ease of doing business is such a local issue, right? And I think it's hard to have perspective about what it means to build in a different jurisdiction. I can tell you that the timeline for getting land use approvals in Los Angeles is 4 times greater than in Portland, but that doesn't make it any easier to do business in the city of Portland. And for folks that remember what it was like in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, it means less than nothing. So kind of writ large, if you're thinking about a development timeline, California a lot tougher. You have moving pieces like CEQA, which is kind of separate and apart from your underlying land use approvals in a way that we don't have here in Oregon. But the pressure and the frustration that I see is the same.
It's the same. And what about, you said you do stuff like north across the river in Washington. Same deal there? It's all, like I said, kind of localized and relative compared to where it's been in the past? Or as your development clients are looking, is there an ease to go to Clark County? Is it more just the economics and demographic side that's driving some of that development up there?
No, I think the cities, you mentioned Clark County. I think the city of Vancouver in particular has done a really good job of expressing what it wants from development in a way that has allowed a lot of people to come in and do great things. The waterfront's a prime example. That is, really a concerted effort with the public and private sector to make sure that the rules of the road are in place to support a very particular type of development and one that's appropriate in that location. So I want to laud the city of Vancouver for all the incredible work that they've done. And I can tell you that my clients really enjoy doing business there, and they see a lot of predictability. And we are seeing a number of folks who traditionally have done stuff in Portland looking more and more at the Vancouver and the broader Clark County market as a viable alternative.
Why are they better at getting that message out? Is it less voices in the room? Is it more of is it from leadership down that this is what we want, as opposed to, what do you see in your experiences? What's driving that to, have some clear idea of this is what we want for this, our city, our municipality. This is what we're striving for. Is like you said, maybe in other places it's not quite as clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think the voices in the room, that's a really interesting thread. I mean, as Oregonians, we have a deep-seated commitment to community engagement at the hyperlocal level. And I think that is fantastic when it comes to things like community planning and kind of how resources are spent within a particular area.
That's hard on land use.
It's definitely hard on land use, and it's a little bit less appropriate in that context because, what an individual wants or what a neighborhood wants today may not be what's best for the city long term, right? What the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And the city of Portland, I think, historically has had a harder time with those sorts of trade-offs, right? Understanding that while we want people to have a voice, we want people to have a seat at the table, we need to create a level of predictability and certainty that's going to allow that national and international capital to come here and provide things like housing and jobs that we need to thrive.
With some certainty that you're not going to get derailed by a small subset of a group that's going to pull this whole project off the rails for a particular interest or concern that may not be, like you said, for the good of everybody within the city.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? And historically, too, we've been very siloed, right? We think about our form of government. It was the most siloed form of government for any reasonably sized city in America. And we created a dynamic where bureaus had to take adversarial positions to each other. And that was the method of doing business. And I think you saw that level of segregation front and center when the city council was having conversations about merging the development bureaus, reorganizing government. And you had really well-intentioned individuals who worked for bureaus coming out and saying something to the effect of, if you do this, you're going to harm our mission. You're going to harm our ability to serve our constituents. And what was so eye-opening to me in those conversations was the fact that, wait a second, right? The city of we're all on the same team here, right? We all need to be pulling and rowing in the same direction. And at the end of the day, there's no city that should have a urban forestry department that has different goals and incentives and alignment than the Water Bureau, right? There just shouldn't be any daylight between those two entities. There could be different
focuses, but the overriding goal should be the same.
Absolutely.
Which kind of comes back to your original point, the original question, is the difference of a municipality that has clear goals and clear direction. Yes, you've got to satisfy some of these departments, but like you said here, it seemed like we had departments going at each other, talking about the benefits of each constituent. Like their constituents are the same; they should be the same. So
that's 100% correct.
Are you confident with the new form of government that we're moving in the right direction? That's going to make this hopefully. I know right now maybe a transitional year, but are you confident that we're heading in the right direction? That maybe get that solidified message out to make this process easier for people in your position and your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an optimist by nature, but I'll say we could not have gone in any direction but up. Right? I think the bureau system as it existed before our current form of government was inherently broken, and it caused so much inefficiency and so much kind of waste and conflict that residents were poorly served. Now we have districts where individuals can speak to elected representatives who actually understand what their needs are in a given part of the city.
Representing that particular district.
That's right. We can have budgeting in a manner that's more holistic and looks at resources appropriately. And at the granular level, we can have staff that actually works in collaborative fashion with each other. All of that is a positive. To your point, this is a learning curve, right? It's not gonna be smooth sailing. The city councilors need to figure out for themselves where their individual and collective authority rests, and that's gonna be a process. But I know where we were was unsustainable, so I'm very hopeful that where we're going will be something other than that.
So now one thing that's been on the topic for a lot of, is the lack of development, lack of permitting, planned development here in this region. Some submarkets have done better than other, but overall, especially in the city of Portland, we're not seeing a lot of on the housing side on permitting. I mean, what are the things that you could say, especially with your background and with your client base, is what could be done to help maybe spur that? Again, we can't control interest rates. We can't, right now. What would you like to see, us moving to that direction that maybe spur some development or get back on the radar for capital outside the market to come look here?
Yeah, certainly an issue, a critical issue, and I just want to frame it a little bit. We talk about a housing crisis. The city of Portland has declared a housing crisis every year consecutively for about a decade.
Yeah, I think we're beyond a decade now. I think it's coming up on 15. Yeah,
15
we're in a
years.
housing emergency. Yes.
Right, housing emergency.
Yes.
And the numbers are starting to get really scary, right? If you look at the analysis that Up for Growth put out, it says that our region is missing about 45,000 units of housing. And by missing, that means there's a fundamental disconnect between household formation, that's kind of units of
housing needed,
right, and the housing that's actually getting produced. If you look at the granular levels since the Great Recession, in Multnomah County, we're building about 7 units of housing, and that's all types, ADUs up to penthouse condominiums, about 7 units of housing for every 10 households getting formed. And that sort of market disconnect is absolutely crushing. It's crushing individuals. We now have as a state, we have over 50% of our renters are housing burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Right. Totally unacceptable. And the number isn't far off for people who own. Obviously, if people got in at a low interest rate, they're kind of protected there. But if you are looking to buy a home now, the amount of money that you're going to be coming out of pocket every month on is totally unsustainable. And it has tremendous knock-on effects, right? For every dollar that I need to spend on housing, I'm not going to be spending it on food, education, entertainment, everything that we need to sustain our economy, and importantly, to build the connective tissue that allows us to be a thriving community, right? For every parent that's nervous about where their child is going to sleep at night, they're not connected. They're not connected. They're not going to church. They're not volunteering. They're not taking time out of their day to focus on the things that make the good life. They're focused on providing that roof. So that imbalance is absolutely, as I said, crushing and something that we need to address. And we're trending in the wrong direction, right? The analysis that came out for 2024 in the city of Portland has housing production numbers at some of the lowest we've seen in decades. And
we're still on that trajectory. We're still in 2025. Not that we're that far in this year already, but we're still seeing those numbers are not. It's not ticking up.
No, it's not ticking up. And so every year we're actually creating a greater and greater backlog, because there's been a lot of chatter around, population. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, well, if people are leaving, doesn't that mean there's going to be more housing? The amount of people that would need to leave this state to correct our housing crisis.
We would have a lot of other problems.
We would have a lot of other problems. Absolutely.
Housing would be the only, yes.
That's not the solution.
No.
Right. And so as that backlog of missing housing is expanding, that pressure on renters and homeowners is increasing. So that's the problem. I think the solution needs to be radical. We have a governor who cares deeply about the housing crisis. She's spent a lot of political capital, both in her time in the legislature and in the governor's mansion, focused on that issue. But we've been picking around the edges. And
there hasn't been a radical change to really drive a change in outcome.
That's right.
We talk about changes in policies, but like you said, it's around the edges. It's nothing. It's going to have to be a big change.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit more. This city spent a lot of time and energy working on what we refer to as middle housing, which is the idea of duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes on lots that were historically zoned for single-family use. Right? We spent a lot of political capital engaged in that conversation. We spent many years, and we developed a fairly progressive code that allows for a wide variety of uses. The adoption and usage of that code is negligible. We're seeing upticks of less than 1% in most parts of the city, and that means
that's the residential infill. That's the RIP program that people talk. We've talked about that before. Yes,
you can look at the numbers from the city of Portland for 2023. and I'm pretty sure this number is correct, the number of fourplexes which were built on single-family lots, we're in the dozens. Yeah. Right. And so that is never going.
That's not moving the needle.
No, it's not moving the needle. It's a great policy. It's helpful. It can be really useful, but it's not going to fix that 45,000 unit number. That 45,000 unit number needs to be absolutely radical change. And I think it really breaks down into several big buckets. The first is we need to come to terms with how we fund our public infrastructure. Since the 90s, the state has essentially relied on development to pay for public infrastructure. Now, we like to say things like, well, those developers will pay for it and they need to pay their fair share. And, those rich, greedy guys over there should be.
It's not their fair share. I mean, it's above and beyond there. It's not even close.
And not only that, it's an extremely aggressive tax on people who aren't even here to defend themselves, right? Every time that we say a new apartment building is responsible for building a road or a sewer system or sidewalk that doesn't exist, you are taxing those future residents because it's the open secret that neighborhood activists refuse to accept, which is the project isn't getting built if somebody's not making money at the end of the day, right? That project has to get funded and there has to be a reasonable rate of return there. And that means every incremental dollar you add to the cost of that project is getting pushed onto the end user who's a tenant or an owner.
Or it won't get built. I mean, that's
Correct.
the thing I was trying to explain to somebody. It'll get pushed to the end users and they're like, to a point, if it doesn't make sense financially, it just won't happen.
Correct.
At the end of the day, you still are left with not more housing, but the same empty plot there. So, I mean, what's really the goal that you're trying to get to?
100%.
Yeah.
Right. So we got to fix the funding issue. And I think the state is starting to acknowledge that. We're looking at putting in place some funding sources, revolving loans, and the ability for local jurisdictions maybe to bond a little bit more to build that critical infrastructure out. We need to ramp that up to 100. Right. We need to stop thinking about residential development as the mechanism to build out public infrastructure. So that's kind of item number one. If you do that, you're dramatically decreasing the cost of housing. And if you think about just...
Would that come from the state down to the municipalities, that this is a policy we've got to... Could it be a state kind of driven policy that this is what they've got to do? Or are we still stuck into local municipalities having to make those kind of changes?
I think it's both and.
Okay.
I think it's state dollars. I think it's local structure, and we probably need to look at how property taxes work, because at the end of the day, we have municipalities that are locked in at unsustainable rates that inhibit their ability to even engage in basic functions. Right? We're seeing it today. Cities are having to add usage fees on utility bills as a mechanism to provide for police forces, right? Fire, life safety services. So it needs to be a state thing, it needs to be a city thing, and it needs to probably be a tax reform thing. The second big thing gets back to your original point around neighborhood engagement, which is we need to rethink how and when engagement should occur. And I know if you look at our vaunted state planning goals, it'll say number one is community engagement. That might have been right in the 1970s. I think that's absolutely wrong today, right? Which is we need to make tough decisions around where a lot of housing is going to go. And if you leave it up to every single neighborhood, people will make the smart choice at that level and say not here.
Right.
Okay. And I'm the first to tell people it sucks having construction next to you, right? I get it. It's loud. It's dusty. There's a guy smoking a cigarette in front.
Park in front of your house.
Yeah. And he's blocking my driveway, and what a jerk. I get it. But we need that on steroids to get to a place where our economy can function properly and we can take that burden off of renters. So the next big thing we got to tackle is taking community engagement and dialing it back aggressively.
Or focusing it on, I always say we don't want to disengage. It's just not in that arena.
Correct.
It should be somewhere else. It's
Absolutely.
not, because it gets involved in there, like you said. Once the local decisions on land use get so local and granular, nothing's going to get through.
Absolutely.
Nothing will get through.
I was talking to my wife about this the other night, and she said, all right, that's good and fine. So you want to tell people not to engage. What should which they do. And I said, you know what? I'd love to see the governor roll out an initiative of local book clubs, right? I love to read. I know my neighbors love to read. I'd love to see government say, here's some resources. Let's put them at the library. Let's find a good way for people to get engaged. And I'm being a little bit facetious here.
Engage in schools, engage in those kind of things.
Absolutely.
But when you start talking about development, as I said, every elected official, you figure out a way how you can push density to a neighborhood of single-family homes.
Correct.
That's the magic key, because you talk about it, but trying to get that through, and again, like you said, we're built around this neighborhood involvement, and every neighborhood has a voice. It's like that. Understand that that's great, but maybe not in this part. Maybe this, because again, the good of the whole. What we do great for this individual neighborhood is not good for the whole.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Right. It is. It's a problem of the commons. It's like dealing with climate change. It's like dealing with big externalities. We need to take a holistic approach. We need to be able to be comfortable and say that housing is a good thing. Housing is something that we should support. And that means dialing back opportunities to stall it and prevent it from occurring. You talk about infill, absolutely critical. We also need to expand our boundaries, right? We have a deep attachment here to farmland. And I love farmland. I love driving by it. I get to look at cows. That's fantastic.
Christmas tree farms, whatever.
Christmas tree farms. These are lovely. We have incentivized those and protected those to the detriment of everything else, right? If you drive in Hillsborough, and if you drive in Tiger, and if you drive in King City, you will see fully urbanized communities with fantastic amenities, and across the street from them are empty fields, okay? That's not a public good. And I will disagree with 1,000 friends every day of the week on that issue, which is, yes, we need to protect farmers and we need to support farming, but we can't do it to the detriment of everything else. And right now, the scale has tipped too far in that regard.
One side.
That's right. We need dramatic expansions.
I'm not saying Houston expansion where there's no zoning and everybody goes everywhere, but there's got to be some middle ground here.
Absolutely. I think Jerry Milner puts out some great analysis on that shows, we've expanded our population by about 80%. And over the same time period, we've expanded our urban growth boundary by about 15%. And again, infill is a part of that, but it can't be 100% of it. There has to be a give and a take there. And for anybody who wants to see what development looks like, I invite you to go check out Reed's Crossing. I invite you to go look at River Terrace, these communities on the west side that are some of the densest in the entire region and are world class. Okay, world class. If you go to Reed's Crossing today, you will get acres and acres of parks, and you won't even think about how dense that housing is because we've evolved the way that we build. And so I think expansions are a fantastic thing, not something to be scared of, not something to be shy of. And Metro, as our regional government responsible for it, needs to be more aggressive in pushing them. Right now, Metro has taken a wait-and-see approach, right? They won't even talk about expansion until a city comes forward, and then they'll have a 9-month conversation.
Or it needs to come top-down.
Correct. Yeah. We need to be having a conversation tomorrow about every piece of land that's an urban reserve in our boundaries and how it's going to be urbanized in the next 10 years. We put those lands in a holding and we said we'll touch them in 20 years, and guess what? We've done nothing with it, right? And that is creating additional pressure in the system that's completely unwarranted, because if we're going to engage in a protracted planning process, then we need to live up to those plans. That's right. I pulled the numbers last week for all of the cities in Clackamas County and East Multnomah County to look at how they did from a housing production strategy between 2018 and 2023. And for that time period where everybody was diligently planning and put together a really robust framework, they produced about 55% of all the housing that was supposed to be built. About 55%.
Which again, we've got a deficit we're trying to meet anyway. That's not sustainable.
That's right. That's right. So I think we need to think about the financing, we need to think about the community engagement, and we need to push aggressively on expansion. And if you start doing those things, then I think we'll see fruit. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for talking about this. I mean, I think the interesting thing for our audience to understand is the political will. It's got to get pushed because these changes take many years to see the effect.
That's right.
And so I think it's got to be pressure from everybody. But I think enlightening kind of the process of how it goes, and there are some incremental increases or incremental wins here and there, and we can look across the river, some of that planning. I think it's very, very beneficial for people to understand that. So thank you for taking the time to come see us, and we'll see you again next time on Multifamily Market Watch.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is a member of Global Real Estate Advisors. Learn more at GREA.com.